See, are we live? Are we live? Are we live? I'm not sure if we're live. I never know when we're live. We're live. Okay, we're live. We're joined this hour by Allan Aquino. Very, very excited. He's a poet, a professor, an author, just a incredible ambassador of the written and spoken word. So we're very, very excited to have you here today with us, Allan. And but before we get started talking about some of these things that you become very well known for, let's talk about how it began. So when did you first get involved in when did you first want to be a writer?
I found encouragement for creative writing back when I was in like 6th grade. So shout out to Mrs. Greenbaum, my old teacher. You know, teachers can change lives. She was the first to give me that encouragement. So ever since then, creative writing has always been a source of comfort and escape. But I didn't start writing poetry itself like prolifically on my own outside of an assignment until I was about 17. So yeah, I'm turning 46 this week. I've been writing poems prolifically since I was 17. And as many of us know, you know, poetry is one of the most democratic and accessible art forms. So, you know, it really is medicine. So it's definitely kept me going all that time. So, yeah.
So how does this begin for you? So you start writing poetry around 17. You start writing more prolifically. You start getting involved. Do you going to open mics? Are you submitting these poems? What does that look like for you?
Well, when I was 17 up until I was around 19, 20, I was completely unaware of the literary scene because, you know, like a lot of kids growing up, we're conditioned to think that poetry is this kind of higher elevated art that doesn't belong, frankly, to kids like us. And yet, like I said, to quote my friend Napoleon Lustra, that's right, you said this first, bro. Poetry is democratic. So naturally, it was medicine. It was a comfort to me. And it was strictly personal. I didn't care about, you know, sharing it with other people. But by the time I went to college, Cal State Northridge, I started connecting with the local arts community. So Wendell Pascual, shout out to him. The mighty Irene Soriano. Okay, Irene, I don't know if you're ever going to hear this, but I got to give you a shout out. You are the one who brought me into the community back in '94. And man, it was this radical moment of realizing that, wait a minute, this poetry thing actually belongs to people like us. And there's a space for us to share it, even if we have to fight for that space. So my first reading was in '94 when I was 20 years old. And ever since then, you know, the decades have gone by so quickly. Yeah, it's just a thrill, you know. So yeah, I've been around that long.
So what was this reading back in the '90s?
Sorry?
Do you remember where the reading was?
Yeah, it was at the Festival of Philippine Arts and Culture. A lot of my folks know it as FPAC, courtesy of Philam Arts. Thank you for everything, Philam Arts. And it was a series that Irene curated, and she was the first person I know, not just the first Filipina, not just the first person of color, but the first person I know, period, who was actually organizing arts events and readings. So I met Irene fall '94 at JANM, Japanese American National Museum, and we connected right away. And even before she read anything I wrote, I don't know if you remember this, Irene, she immediately invited me to this first reading. It's like, I just met you, you haven't even read anything I've written, and you're inviting me to a reading, you know, like, holy shit, all right. And it's just as simple as that. She just, you know, had faith in me from the beginning. I don't know why, but, you know, it changed my life. So I'm always going to owe a debt of gratitude to her. And yeah, that's how it started. So it was at the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium Auditorium in San Pedro. That's where FPAC, you know, had their festival back then. And yeah, that's where it was. So ever since then, I tried to go to readings as much as I could just to get a taste of the environment. Whether or not I was reading, it didn't matter. But yeah, it was such a thrill to discover what, you know, our LA community has to offer. Yeah.
So this is you know, eventually intended for a wider cross section site. I mean, I'm gonna share this and, you know, put it in different places. So can we get can you give us our audience a little understanding, a little deeper understanding of what FPAC was and your, not just your participation in it, but like just a broader picture of what it looked like. I mean, like what else is going on?
Yeah, well, FPAC again stands for the Festival of Philippine Arts and Culture. It was first launched, I think, in '91. Correct me if I'm wrong, friends. I'm sorry if I am. And initially, it started over at LACC before it was moved to San Pedro, near the Cabrillo Marine Park or whatever. And it is just as the name describes. It's a festival of specifically Filipino American arts and culture. So it's literally a cultural carnival for all ages, for all families, for all communities. It's free, and it was free and open to the public. And you had an opportunity to visit different kiosks and merchants. I think, a lot of us have been to cultural festivals kind of like that. Not just Filipino Americans, of course. And then, of course, there are performance stages and, a lot of um, collateral events happening around this large park area.
Yeah.
So that was the environment of my first reading. But the poetry reading itself was indoors at the auditorium there, and it was a relatively small crowd. I think like maybe a dozen people or so. Yeah, like 5 of them were friends of mine.
Yeah.
So Gigi and Angelo, you remember being there? Anyway, um, but it grew ever since then, So the size, the attendance of these kinds of readings grew over time, and before you know it, it became like not just this special occasion that would happen once a year. It was like a regular weekly thing, and it was wonderful to discover. And it wasn't a surprise to know that readings like this were not just limited to Filipino American poets, but like other communities were doing it as well. So it was only natural that we started cross pollinating and connecting. So yeah, I was there in '94, and ever since then, it's amazing how things just grew. And when I think of that, that does give me some comfort and hope. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you remember any of the poets you met at this first reading?
Oh my God, yes, I did. Faye Coons was there. She's somewhere on my friends list, I think. And I actually shared the stage with an author, Cecilia Manguera Brainard. So my other Pinay Pinoy authors know who she is. And by that time, I'd read her novel, Song of Yvonne. It was later re-released under the title When the Rainbow Goddess Wept. And I was actually kind of starstruck because, her novel changed my life. It was like one of the first times that on my own I read writing by a person of color, and specifically Filipino American. So when I found out I was going to be the lineup with her, yeah, that was like intimidating, of course, and I was very starstruck and nervous. But the fact that Irene, once again, I got to give her the shout out. The fact that Irene just had this instant faith in me and gave me the opportunity, it changed my life forever. So if there's anything good that I've done, in the art scene of the poetry world, it really goes back to those early pioneers.
Yeah. So can you just a little bit more about like can you expand a little bit more on being starstruck? I mean, it's kind of like just history. So trying to gather some just like interesting moments. So what was it like being starstruck like that? I mean, it's the first poetry reading. You're 20 years old. I mean, you're an adult, but you're still young. And here, this is your entryway. And all of a sudden, this person's got a novel. You read the novel, and you're like, so like.
Yeah, well, I was starstruck because it was like a light switch turned on. Because up until like that, not just that moment, but that moment of my life, that time of my life, it was like a light switch when you realize how empowered folks like us actually are. Because growing up, in this particular in this particular society, as children of color, as children of immigrants, people of color in general, we know what it is to feel marginalized and invisible and voiceless every moment of our lives. And so we're conditioned to think that way and act that way as we grow up, to be silent, to be passive, to blend in and not raise trouble and all that. And yet, here are individuals who come from backgrounds just like myself, who have no fear, who speak up, and who actually affect change in real practical ways. And the fact that they do it through a creative medium that I have an interest in, that's all the more inspiring. So when I say that it was like a light switch, explosive moment, it was because I realized, wow, we actually have power. We actually have a voice, and we have the freedom to do it in our own way, to contribute to the collective, you know the collective pool of our stories. Yeah, that's why I was starstruck. And the fact that I met a published author,
Yeah.
yeah, that's when I realized, oh my God, this is actually possible. So it was this explosion of realizing all these possibilities of what we can do to change our world, and frankly, to have a lot of fun while doing it. So
Yeah. So so that when you entered college, did you intend to when you were an English major initially, or did you switch majors, or how'd that work out?
oh man.
How did your parents respond to hearing that you wanted to be a writer?
Well, long story there. Yeah, I have a weird, kind of complicated life, so I'm going to try to keep this brief and get to the point, which is the college years and starting all that. Um, I lost my parents early on, and I was in the care of, relatives since I was like 15 when my mom died. So, I was very much a lost soul, didn't know what to do. Plus, being Filipino American, it's like my people are on the margin, in the margins on so many different levels. That invisibility is like, kind of like the default, self perception, if that makes sense. So I went to CSUN, frankly, because I wasn't accepted anywhere else. And I didn't even know if I wanted to go to college because, what's the point? Yeah, my high school years were some of the toughest, years of my life by any standard. So I was very cynical, very Generation X, as they say. And I just ended up at CSUN because I thought, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. And frankly, the first year there, I was on academic probation. I didn't give a shit about much. I didn't go to class. But I will say that in my fall year, a life-changing, miraculous thing happened. I was a member of the Filipino American Student Association, and they were advised by the CSUN Asian American Studies Department. So fall 92, I think it was November 92, Asian American Studies and CSUN FASA invited Philip Veracruz to speak on campus. Now, Philip Veracruz was the former vice president of the United Farm Workers Movement. He was co-executive with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. So when Manong Philip Veracruz spoke, that was actually my first awakening. My literary creative awakening came 2 years later when I met Irene. But in terms of my identity, as a person of color, as a Filipino American, as born and raised and whatever, that's what really started the journey for me. When I realized again this possibility that people like me belong, and in fact, over time, you learn how people like us don't just belong. We invented all of this. We are the foundation of this society. And it's time that you give credit where credit is due. So that's how it started. And by that time, like I said, I started writing poetry. I started writing poetry when I was 17. I was 18 when I met Philip Veracruz, Manong Philip. And I began to adapt my poetry to this new vision, this new way of seeing the world. So up until then, I wrote very personal poems about, life, everyday life, relationships, whatever, that kind of stuff. Manong Philip was a poet as well. He wrote poetry. And yeah, I started to do that. So within like a year and a half time, my personal creative writing began to reflect the larger context of my life. So I'm not just this individual bratty kid named Allan Aquino. I'm part of a larger, community, part of a larger world. And I felt that, the purpose of poetry is not just to express and to heal oneself, but to bring medicine to others as well, so to speak. So yeah, I guess that's my uh, early roots as a writer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered
Yeah.
your question. Don't mean to ramble.
Definitely. It kind of leads into other questions, right? And I wanna
Cool.
give you the opportunity to talk about, answer some of those more, or talk about what it means to, to try and represent your community, and represent the community that you come from, that you care about, that you see yourself as a part of a long lineage of things that come before you and things that will come after you, and the important responsibility. I want to talk about that, but I'm also kind of interested in talking about some of these, the kind of the more interesting and kind of unexpected ins and outs of things, right? So, like, do you find yourself oftentimes the only poet in the room? Like, you're like next to an organizer, you're next to like some type of academic, that's more like in the social sciences, and then you're like this poet, right? And like this is the poet that will like speak to our people, right? And then you like have like 2 minutes, and then you're sitting there on a panel for like listening to these blowhards talking for like. You're wondering, how did I get here? Why am I here? I'm like, or am I just describing my own life? I don't know.
Well, first of all,
Yeah.
but before I continue, I gotta say this really quick, everyone. I swear to God, this is the first time I've actually had a live conversation on, this FaceTime tech. I've explained to Matt my tech situation. I've explained my colleagues my tech situation, and God, I've known you for like years now, and this is literally the first time we've talked face to face, so to speak. And yet, like, I've always felt like you're a friend that I've known for a long time. So my first point is, yeah, you may well be describing your life, but I understand. I understand. Yeah. I've kind of had moments like that, where you are the kind of token in the room who's, given alternative perspective. I never felt that kind of marginalization amongst like my Asian American studies kin.
Yeah.
But if I would get invited or involved with other events, I mean, yeah, on multiple levels, I am the kind of I hesitate to say token, but yeah, I am the kind of token in the room.
Yeah.
I'm the Pinoy guy, I'm the creative writing guy, and there's nothing about me that fits the popular stereotype of what a Filipino dude is supposed to be. Okay, my mom was a nurse, but I'm not, and I'm horrible at math. I'm a, I'm a language person, that sort of thing. And naturally, because you know, Filipino American poets and scholars don't grow on most people's trees or whatever. Yeah, I end up becoming that kind of guy, and I think for the most part, my experiences have been positive, but I empathize with you. Yeah, there are those moments where you feel odd, for lack of a better word, and you do kind of look around and say, "I'm not sure why I'm here."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I don't mean like amongst like poets from like different backgrounds in this. I'm talking about like being involved in like like today is like like the 50th annual commemoration of such and such, and then you're like, I don't know. It just when they put together these events, and they want poetry at them, they want poetry like, and now we will honor the poets and da da da, and it's funny because like the MC's introduction of you will actually last usually longer than the time you've been allotted to do your poem. And it's just like you say all this stuff about like how you're gonna honor the poet and the this and that, the other, and you're using poetry as a metaphor for all kinds of things. I remember I was at this event for it was I don't care, I'll just say it. It was this a fundraiser for the Cheech, right? For the Cheech Marin, he's gonna open up this thing. And
yeah.
all these people, everyone, like 4 people got up there, including Cheech Marin himself, and talked about and used poetry as a metaphor, but there was not a single poet put into the entire event. So I was just like, oh my God, like the way people's construction of like what poetry should be and how poetry is an outgrowth of our community. We need to celebrate poetry within our community. So I'm talking about the community events more. And then like the way you actually treat poets is it's always almost like a weird afterthought. I don't know. That's been my experience. I don't know about you. I mean, maybe it's different.
Yeah, nothing quite like that. But yeah, I recognize where you're coming from. Yeah. I've just like I certainly have not been featured as much as you do, at least these days. So you're certainly a fine choice, no question, to be a featured poet. But yeah, you can see it on my face. I was like really surprised to hear that. Like, wow. No, I mean,
Yeah.
you were treated that way for real. Yeah. But anyway, um, I'm just happy to like read if I can. Yeah, so honestly, I'm like, you actually want to hear from me? Thanks, fine, I'll, whatever. And I've most of my experience, I guess, I felt okay. But then again, I have a weird attitude about it. I'm kind of zen. I'm like, okay, I did my thing. Thanks, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I feel you though.
Yeah.
To be a poet it's a hell of a calling. I mean, it's not a joke, man. It is. It's not just a hobby or like a side talent. It is a way of life, and a lot of people don't appreciate how lonely and marginalizing it can be. So that's why I have a natural empathy for poets, because I think I have a good idea of what we all go through, for better or worse.
Better or
You
worse.
know.
Yeah. So okay, so you're going to university. You're at CSUN, and then now you teach at CSUN. So like, tell us about that. What was the journey from your completion of your degree to like now teaching at your alma mater? I mean, how's that come about?
Yeah. Again, this comes back to these singular moments that change your lives forever. Um, there's a there's this great quote that there are days that define your life beyond your story. Something akin to that. So meaning that a lot of us will experience these singular moments that not only change our lives, but change the worlds that we inhabit forever. So for me, I've already mentioned two of those moments. The first was meeting Philip Cruz and attending um, my first Asian American Studies in CSUN FASA event. The other life changing event was being featured in my reading and being welcomed to the community by Irene Soriano. In between those two events, I took my first Asian American Studies class, fall '93. And up until that time, I was a quote unquote philosophy major. I didn't know what the fuck I was gonna do with that degree. I chose it because it sounded cool and because Bruce Lee was a philosophy major, But I like failed philosophy 100 my first semester, and I had no idea what I was gonna do with it. So I just did it to, because I was you know, just going through the motions, being a total sheep. But when I took my first class, Asian American Studies, fall 1993, my mentor, Dr. Kenyon Chan, spoke. That's when I realized I think I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to research and study and tell our stories, not just the Allan Aquino story, not just the Filipino American narrative, but our stories as people of color, as immigrants, as marginalized peoples. And I want to see what other people are going to do with this knowledge, because I feel like I've just been given the keys to the biggest treasure chest and toy store in the world. But what's the fun of having these toys and treasures if I don't get to share them with anyone? So it was in ethnic studies. It's never about vanity. It's about the bigger picture. It's about opening up this treasure chest that we've always had and sharing it. And when I put these toys and treasures in the hands of other people, that's where the thrill comes in, because I just wait and see what they're gonna do with it. So I made my own choices. Long story short, uh, I suddenly became a good student because I realized that if I even am gonna have a chance at doing what Dr. Chan is one day, I got to figure out this academic game. So it's kind of like realizing what reality is after you get unplugged from the matrix, right? To use that analogy, when you're unplugged from the matrix and you decide you want to do something about it, you have to learn how to master the rules and the logic of that world, without losing yourself in it. So I dove into academia, and for better or worse, it was a hell of a struggle. It was a hell of a fight. It took me 6 years to graduate from CSUN, um, just so I could figure out how to deconstruct the system from the inside, so to speak. So I became a good student. I came up with my own methods of understanding and absorbing information. And that's one of the key messages I try to get across to my students today. It seems like it's this insurmountable task. The next 4 or 5 years of your life, you're going to get hit by waves and waves of information and data. You're going to drown in this electromagnetic storm of ideas, but you still have to find a way to stand up at the end of the day. So you have to figure out your own way of getting through this system. You have to figure out your own tools and methods of finding your way through. And basically, that's what I did. And I'm not going to get into that dialogue about how I did this and that. That's going to take forever. But I figure out my way through the system. I got good grades. I knew what hoops I had to jump through. And so I did have one problem, and that was there is no Asian American Studies major at the time. That was not implemented until 99, 2000, and I graduated in 98. So I did something amazingly cool. With the help of Dr. Kenyon Chan, I was able to meet with one of the heads of the academic advisor department, Professor James Green, who was also a professor of the Pan African Studies, now Africana Studies department. And with Professor Green, Professor Chan, I learned that I could custom design my own major. So they kind of found a back door, a side door for me. An Asian American Studies major does not exist. You want to be an Asian American Studies professor. So what are we going to do? So I figured, why not do a comparative ethnic studies major? And I could use that as a kind of stepping stone to a grad program. So it's a big picture, step by step. I got to jump through this hoop and that hoop just so I could end up on the other side of the classroom, hoping that I can inspire, people to take our treasures. So on my diploma, 98, it was supposed to say Asian American and comparative ethnic histories, but that couldn't fit on the diploma, so they just shortened it to Asian American historical studies. But this is the cool part. My major classes, which I was able to design with Professor Green, um, took some of the key classes, not just from Asian American studies, but Chicano studies, American Indian studies, and U.S. history. And I also think, I think I had a GWS class in there as well. So I got to study with, like, oh my God, I studied with Rudy Acuna, 1996. Oh, that's another moment that changed my life forever. Professor Acuna, godfather of Chicano studies, changed that. He changed my life forever. And I also got to study with Professor Gatlin over in Africana Studies. So it enriched me by confirming what I always knew, that Filipino American, Asian American experiences are interconnected with all of those around us. And the more you look into our histories and cultures, the more you see how connected we are. So having an ethnocentric approach is good. It's a very important thing. You should be in touch with your heritage, your culture, and why it matters. But at the same time, speaking on my own behalf, the more I examine and look at my own Filipino American experience, the more I see how I connect to the Asian American experience, Chicano experience, Black experience. I see how we're all connected, and I see why we need not be victims of these convoluted divide and conquer tactics. We should embrace and respect one another's identities and individualities, but at the same time, let's celebrate those common roots that we have, and in a realistic, critical way. So I know that sounds very clinical itself, but that's the choice I made, and I'm so honored and glad I made that choice. So I basically ended up in the UCLA Asian American Studies, the master's program. It's a 2-year program, and maybe I could talk about my experiences there another time. But I was finally hired in the year 2000 at CSUN, and the way that happened is another amazing, moment of
Yeah.
convergence.
And before we get to that, can you talk a little bit about can you expand a little bit about Rudy Acuna? Like, what was it like taking him, and why was that so groundbreaking for you?
Um, It was it I forgot the course title. It was the 450 course, History of the Chicano. Now, prior to taking this class, I took the at the time it was Chicano Studies 345, History of Mexico, with Professor Alberto Garcia. Um, so all right, so that was fall. Yeah, that was fall 1996 when I was in Rudy's class, and we read the fourth edition of Occupied America, one of his signature texts. And one of the things that was so meaningful about Professor Acuña's class was when he learned on the first day of class that I was Pinoy, Filipino American. Oh, he treated me like a brother, and he started talking nonstop about Pinoy heritage and Pinoy culture. And it didn't surprise me, but it kind of caught me off guard. And I thought it was really like classy and gracious of him. And what I loved about his engaging personality and style was he constantly talked about personal experiences. And as a community elder, you know, he has experienced so very much, but he wasn't just like talking for the sake of talking. He was talking about how his experiences are a reflection of the larger picture of history and society. And by doing that, it was an inspiration for me, and I think for a lot of my classmates to consider doing the same, you know, by telling our stories and understanding how they're part of a larger context. And not only validates our stories, but inspires other people to see how, yeah, we are all a part of this. And Dr. Acuna was, aside from a couple of my other Asian American Studies mentors, was the only professor of mine who actually talked about Filipino Americans. And he didn't just talk about the UFW. By the way, this is my T-shirt today. Remember the Delano Manong's Brown Unity. Shout out to Manila Rice, who designed this shirt. Shout out to KMB. Um, yeah, he was the first professor outside of Asian American Studies to ever openly affirm and talk at length about the role of Filipino Americans, not just in the UFW, but you know, we were part of you know, the history of the 40s, Pachuco culture as well. You know, the Manongs, the farm laborers, they all got together on the weekends and did their thing. You know, we all grew up together. And even prior to then, taking classes in Filipino American experience and taking classes on the history of Mexico, of course, I was well aware of how for hundreds of years the cultures and the peoples of Mexico, Central America, and the Philippine archipelago have cross-pollinated and influenced each other. Um, so it was like a homecoming, you know, because now I'm taking a class essentially on the history of the United States. And here's Dr. Acuna not only talking about the Chicano experience, but, you know, bringing Pinoys into the fold as well. And in that edition of his book, Occupied America, edition 4, 1996, he talks about Larry Leong and the other Filipino American leaders. So, you know, nobody in U.S. history, you know, ever like covered that in my experience. So yeah, when I took a class with him, I felt very much at home. And he was always kind. He was always funny. He would pick on me, but in like a big brother kind of way. And when he told his life story, uh, thematically anyway, it reminded me so much about, you know, what it was like for me and a lot of my friends growing up, Pinoy and Chicano alike. So yeah, it felt like home when I was in his class.
And so, you know, I mean, like you have the kind of vague understanding, like or not actually vague, but like generally speaking, we have a anecdotal understanding of certain things, and then like or kind of just general understanding. But then to like look at like these million different threads that connect all these things, what kind of like impact? I mean, like what you talked about light bulb earlier, going off about like, okay, I want to be a writer, I want to share, you know, like not just myself, but the whole community. All right, so what kind of light bulb went over your head taking Rudy's class about the interconnectedness of communities?
Well, it inspired me to be aware and whenever possible, take an opportunity to just read more and listen more to the viewpoints and voices of other writers and poets. And what I think, one of the things that Rudy, that Professor Acuna, and other ethnic studies professors did for me was they helped dissolve the illusions of separateness that we're raised to believe in, you know, and they inspired me. The light bulb was they inspired me to consider the idea of interconnectedness and oneness rather than separateness. Now, obviously, there is an illusion of separateness. We all come from individual identities, individual cultures. We have differences culturally, geographically, or so it seems. If you look deeper into our history, and if you look deeper into our common social and historical experiences now, that's where the treasures lie. That's where things come in. So the ethnics, for me, I don't mean to speak on behalf of all other, you know, academics or my colleagues. Certainly, for me, the treasure of ethnic studies is realizing that what unites us is our common social and historical experiences. Common social and historical experiences. Our ancestors may come from different parts of the world. They may come from, you know, different cultures. They may speak different languages, Hell, in the Asian American paradigm alone, the history of Asia is thousands of years of people trying to kill each other. That's the history of Asia. So that's why a lot of people, a lot of Asian American people don't like the term Asian American. They don't want to get lumped in with their historic enemies. But the meaning of society is, hey, right here, right now, we're all dealing with common social and historical experiences, especially a lot of common shit that we got to figure out. And if we are going to, continue on as a society, we got to understand what brings us together rather than what's keeping us apart. And for me, one of the ways of doing that is having an understanding of our common social and historical experiences. We embrace our individual identities, we embrace our individual cultures, which is a beautiful thing. It's a necessary thing. But more importantly, you realize how it connects with everybody else. So you can look at the voice or the experience of another person from another community and initially think that their experiences are different than yours. But the real treasure is how much empathy you find yourself feeling and identifying with their story. So that's why, like I said, when I was in Rudy's class, I didn't feel separated at all. I felt very much connected. And what I realized was this is the kind of spirit that ethnic studies classes should have. They should encourage everyone to come to the table, be open-minded and respectful, of course, but to come to the table nonetheless. Because if they do a little bit of the work, they may find that they actually belong and have something good to contribute. Yeah.
Right. So it's very interesting that this concept of Asian American is always kind of fascinating because you know I think Asian Americans make up something like 7% of the population
Yeah.
of the whole country.
Right.
And so it's kind of thought of as like kind of like minority that's kind of there. But Asians actually, if you want to categorize people just living in the continent of Asia, that's like 65% of the world's population lives in Asia. Like so it's such a weird idea of a minority, but it's representative of 65% of humanity lumped into this category. It just makes absolutely
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's and the even weirder parts are like when you start getting to West Asia, right?
Right.
And the way the census categorizes that. So then, like, you start talking about like Iranians or Armenians, all these different groups of people considered like technically like white on the census. I mean, certainly not white like general society, but white on the census. But it's in Asia, so why wouldn't it be Asian American?
Right.
And then when in the United States you say Asian, it's typically meant like kind of East Asia. Whereas in England, it's more like Central Asia or like India, like that area.
Yeah.
So it's just a bizarre. The phrase itself is the way it means different things in different places. Huh?
Yeah. You raise a lot. Yeah, you raise a lot of really important issues there. One thing is, race is a social construction. It's not an intrinsically real thing. There's no such thing as a quote unquote pure race. Okay, race came from the same source that invented Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Okay, now Santa Claus is not physically real, but Santa Claus has a real physical meaning, right? You see Santa Claus decorations, you know that Christmas and winter break is coming up. Race is like that in the same way. It's a social cultural construct, but what is the purpose of it? Historically, it's used to maintain inequality and power and status quo. And it's so complicated. There's nothing intrinsically real about race, that people and agencies are going to reinvent it to suit their own needs. So you're absolutely right. The term Asian is complicated and crazy. And I understand why a lot of so-called Asian American people don't like that label, because they don't like to have their individuality washed away or ignored, because they've already been erased as it is. And there is a significant group of us who advocate the idea of Asian America, Asian American studies and Asian American communities. And in that regard, it comes down to what I said earlier. Now, I will confess something right here, which should not shock anyone. Most of my knowledge of other Asian cultures comes from restaurant menus, man. Comes from restaurant menus. I don't even consider myself bilingual, but I definitely consider myself Filipino American, Filipino, all that good stuff. And yet, if you were to ask me, but Allan, you consider yourself Asian American? I would say yes. And it is not because I'm an expert on all these different cultures, but I am well aware, again, of the common social and historical experiences we've shared and the common social issues that we deal with today. So for me, uh, it's not just muscle memory, it's just natural instinct to understand and recognize that issues that affect, say, like, the Korean American community, the Hmong community, the Southeast Asian communities, the Khmer community, and so forth, because I know that there is a thread that ties our experiences together. And, I feel that way about all communities, to be honest, because, that is the mindset that ethnic studies provides. So whenever I took classes in Chicano studies or American Indian studies or Africana studies, honestly, I never once felt like an outsider. At an early point in those semesters, I felt a belonging, I felt a connection, and I very easily got along with my classmates, regardless of where we came from, what our backgrounds were. So yeah, there is some merit to the idea of an Asian American identity, Asian American community. But it's important that we let people know what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not our superficial similarities; it's our common experiences. And I love that word experiences because it's something that's shared. Yeah, that's my take on it. But yeah, you're spot on when you talk about how like complicated and confusing it is. It is.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, no, I mean, the same thing can be said of the kind of the category of Latinx or Latinos. I mean, that's also like
Yes.
multiple amounts of people, different historical trajectories. Um, but when you talk about Asia, you're talking about 65% of the world's population. So it seems like even more like unwieldy. That seems like just quantitatively even more unwieldy because now you're talking about like the majority of the world, like called this one thing, which is a minority. Like this is very what are we talking about here? But yeah, no, that definitely because of the conditions of the United States of America, there's definitely. I mean, your point is well taken. There's a necessity to get this thing across. So in that vein, can you talk about like you say that when you were in school there was no Asian American studies, you had to do things or things like that. But today you are a professor of Asian American studies at Cal State Northridge. So can you talk about the establishment of Asian American studies at CSUN?
Um, the Department of Asian American Studies at CSUN was implemented in the 1989-1990 school year and officially took off 1990. Asian American Studies itself, its roots go hand in hand with Chicano studies and African American studies, Black studies, going back to Berkeley, San Francisco State, and Cal State Northridge as well. The Third World Strikes, 1968, 1969. The Asian American Studies Center at UCLA did provided the country, I think the bulk of the cutting edge scholarship on Asian Americans. They go way back to the 70s and 80s. But at CSUN, our department launched by the early 90s. And again, I came in 92, so I was like literally almost there from the beginning. And our department came about because the students and administrators on our side demanded it. They went through all the proper channels. And beginning in the year 1986, we had our first Asian American professors actually teaching classes in the anthropology department. Of course, my colleagues know I'm talking about Dr. Laura Uba, who was one of my great mentors. But the department itself was established in 1990. And needless to say, we got complete support from our family and our allies in the other ethnic studies department. And it was part of a period of change because like soon after we came about, that's when the American Indian Studies program and ultimately the Central America Studies program department began to emerge. So yeah, the early 90s was really that turning point period in the history of ethnic studies at CSUN. And yeah, amazingly, it doesn't feel that long ago to me, but yeah, I was there since 92. Yeah, that's how it came about.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to put you on the spot. You can just tell me no. You can tell me no. It's totally possible. But this entire time we've been talking about you as a poet. Do you have any poetry available at hand that you can share with us?
Well, I happen to have some wonderful poems right here. Oh, by the way, really quick, I think I was talking about this with Louis Vette. No, she's watching. Shout out. But when we get over this quarantine shit, man, we got to do a live series, and I want to do something kind of like inside the actors' studios or whatever, and just like sit down poets live and have conversations, about their work. And like, I'll message you later, dude. We got to, I told you I got my class in the fall. Even if we do it virtually, I want to do something with you this fall, but we'll talk about that later.
I'm down. I'm not. Like this is part of an interview series kind of thing that I'm trying to do. But like, I need to publish I need to put up my book. So like, yes, the answer is yes. I need to put that
book. All right, I'll tell you more later. Yeah, I got some ideas. Yeah, I definitely, it'll happen, man. It'll happen. I'm just waiting for the day we can do it live for real. But yeah, okay. Well, thank you for asking. I would not say no to you, sir. I'm honored to be asked. Okay, so I'll write a poem that I wrote. Actually, I wrote this in '97. Wow. I wrote this in '97, and for whatever reason, I haven't published a book of my own work, not officially yet anyway. But this is one of the pieces that I've published that people kind of know me for. I won't get into the whole history behind it, but would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. All right. Some of you know this poem. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. It's called "Broken on the Wheel," and I wrote it in '97. The title "Broken on the Wheel" has a dual meaning. When I took Pan-African studies, I learned about some of the punitive measures that colonialists would do to punish their more rebellious slaves. And one of the torture methods was called wheel breaking, where their bodies would be tied to this torture wheel until their backs, were snapped in half. Just as disgusting as it sounds, and it also, so it was a reference to that, the idea of being, psychically enslaved, and also the idea of a wheel is also from Buddhist philosophy as well. I was raised Catholic like a lot of kids, but through Asian American studies, I adopted, Buddhist philosophy in my life. So that's kind of the double meaning. So yeah, it's about, it's about psychological and emotional enslavement to commercial culture. All right, that's my academic thesis on it. But anyway, this is just a poem I wrote when I was an angry 22-year-old kid. Broken on the Wheel. The days are a wheel, part light, part shadow. This morning I'm reborn, sensing a dream from hours earlier where nothing died and I was built for eternity. Then I awaken like a tiger, refit with pistoned legs. Today I will hunt for true beauty in a box, a joy, a love, a belief. I roam with my kindred, lulled by the neon of the Northridge Fashion Center. According to Tibetan mythology, they gave us those glossy bead bracelets. We are reborn eon after eon in cycles of life and death because of expediency, pride, appetite. That's such a cool philosophy. It gives those Buddha candles in my bathroom this cool vibe. But anyway, today I want an AR with a heat shield. Say hello to my little friend. Or maybe a new netbook. I can see it now. Terabytes of power awaiting at Best Buy. Or how about that EXV6 Black Cherry Vet with the chrome rims? Today that would be something. And I can't even remember how I got here. Tonight it'll take forever to rest. Most of the time I'll ponder what to score tomorrow, or maybe I'll stare at the moon, remembering how it stirred my mind as a child. And then there's a sudden pang, as if my spine has snapped. But that doesn't stop my fade to sleep. The days are a wheel, part light, part shadow. It's like death after 365 revolutions, yet life is still the same. Broken on the Wheel.
Yeah, that's really great. That's really great. Okay, so what advice do you have for people who are just getting involved right now, who are just I mean, we're in the COVID period right now, but people who feel like they have something they have something in them, but they're not sure like how to get it out or where to take it. But they feel like they want to write, and they want to write, and they want to write for more than just themselves. They want to write for community. What advice do you have to them to get that wheel turning?
I feel that a lot of us have been raised to fear our own voice. And that's one of the reasons I think why we spend the earliest, decades of our life so silent and compliant with, the larger world, so to speak. We are raised since birth to be silent and compliant, and that creates this notion that you shouldn't talk because what if you say the wrong thing? And that is nothing more than fear. So to those who are at least thinking or entertaining the idea of writing and putting your work out there, and I know I'm quoting some of my elders and passing along their ideas to you. Get over your fear of your own voice, because there's nothing to fear. The only thing scary is discovering not the power that you lack, but the power you have. If there's anything scary about it, I think that's what's scary about it. It's the fact that you think you're powerless is not the scary thing, but maybe the scary thing is you do have power, and damn, it is real power. But if you want to begin to use it, you have to get over that initial fear of your own voice. Now, communicating and being an artist is a process. It's not a light switch, right? I mean, we have our light switch moments, our light bulb moments, but the act of speaking and putting that voice to action and use, it's a process, and it's up to you to figure out when the time is right. But we all have that fundamental human nature where we just act on instinct. So have faith in your own instincts. And when you do speak, it will be because the time is right. And when you start speaking, the advice I want to give is don't ever stop. Don't ever stop. Because that voice is about as valuable as your heartbeat. You can't just stop your heartbeat any damn time you want, unless you want to die. But you'll find that your voice, when put to use, especially in an empowering way, in a self-affirming way, life-affirming way, that will be as precious to you as the breaths you take or the heartbeats you have. So on your own time, silent, apprehensive would-be poet, take that first step of giving yourself permission to speak and stand up. And when you're ready to find a community, here's the cool part. We're here. We're right here. We're waiting for you. When you're ready, we will be ready. And it starts with you. But the way I see it, to be honest, what do you got to lose? What are you really afraid of? You're afraid you're going to be judged? Okay, fine. You're afraid that someone's not going to like your work? Okay, fine. You ever stop to consider the people who will be touched, who will love what you do, who will find connection with you? You ever consider the people who are immediately going to wrap their arms around you figuratively and be like, oh my God, you belong with us. We need voices like yours. When that happens, trust me, it's worth it. And you will find that this crazy life, as crazy as it is worth it because you're a part of it and you have something to contribute. So your fear is understandable, but you know what? Don't be afraid. And when you're ready, we will be ready as well.
I, I got nothing. I can't say anything better. So there. Thank you, Al. That was beautiful.
Thank you,
That was
sir.
beautiful.
It's been an honor. So till next time, I will talk to you soon. Okay?
I wait.
Yes, sir.